don't think Rogue is good enough. And for the most part, we agree with it based on our own experiences. It so happens that Kin has landed on the conclusion that Warrior isn't good enough. And maybe he just knows something that we don't.
Yeah, this is definitely flying in the face of the vast majority of Hearthstone players' opinions. If you just go onto most streams at the moment of GMs or professional players, you will see a lot of Warrior, if not played by them, then their opponents on ladder. And Kin, again here, we're seeing not only is he not bringing the Warrior, his strategy seems to consistently be banning the Demon Hunter instead of the Warrior from his opponent. Not only does he not bring it, he doesn't care if his opponents get to play it. And to be perfectly honest, that strategy, or that specific part of the strategy with Warrior in particular, hasn't been working out great for him.
Yeah, and you would think that if you're leaving up Warrior, you've got a solid a plan to deal with it. And as far as we can see, we were thinking that maybe this Highlander Hunter has the game against it. But between Kin's games and even Blitzchung's, I don't know if it's been able to take a single win against Warrior.
I don't know if it has either. Yeah, I think Warrior might have lost once against Blitzchung when Frosty was playing it earlier on in the week. But like you say, Warrior is just overall one of the strongest decks. But taking a look at the decks that Kin favors over that, we of course have the Rogue that is in the vast majority of players' lineups. Not a deck that we are overly fond of in the current metagame. It holds a special place in both of our hearts from its peak in the pre-rotation metagame. But for right now, it is a shadow of its former self. But on the other two decks, the Druid and the Hunter at least, we're pretty big fans of. And the Druid, time and again, despite what I say about it feeling not especially well suited to the metagame, is just getting the job done.
It does seem to be one of those decks that has the unbeatable draws sometimes. The Fungal Fortunes on coin, into coin, Innervate, Blowfly can just 1-2 punch a lot of the decks in the meta. And timed right, if it's early enough, sometimes it can get there against Warrior before they're even able to do the risky skipper combos. But again, we keep talking about the strength of Warrior because it's so unpredictable, so flexible about how it can go about its game plan.
That's exactly right. Despite being at 88% bring rate here in Asia Pacific, this is one of the few times that we are actually going to get to see the deck in action. And it's always a treat to get to see it because it is one of those decks that is just so incredibly difficult to play. No matter who you ask, they will tell you have to grind game after game after game before you're even going to get close to a positive win rate. But I have faith that Posesi, of all people, will have put the work in and will be able to take a win against pretty much any of Kin's decks that we saw there. Because in my opinion, he's got himself just 3 pretty good matchups. The Rogue and the Druid in particular, very nice for the Warrior. The Hunter, as you keep bringing up, does have a little bit of a sweet spot against the Warrior where it has consistent medium to large size minions, which the Warrior does struggle to deal with. But even then, Warrior can just do some truly disgusting things.
Yeah, and I think I gotta thank Kin for leaving up Warrior because we get to talk about it now that it's not banned. And the innovations towards Warrior week after week are very fascinating to me. And now it seems that more and more players are cutting the serpent eggs altogether. Posesi's list is not including those. Instead, he's opted for the double injured 12 years, double rampage. And the injured 12 year has been kind of in and out of the meta. When Rogue loses popularity, you don't need to run the 12 year because it's in there, I think, in large part due to how it interacts with Seal Fade and Backstab, which is it can't be targeted by those.
Yeah, it does very nicely in a Rogue-heavy metagame, which is, again, Posesi using his knowledge of how popular Rogue would be, but still not bringing it himself, is an interesting dynamic, but one that's working very well for him here. But I think the most common change, or the most concrete change that we've seen in Warrior, has been the trend towards Grommash Hellscream, whereas it was traditionally seen as a little bit too slow, a bit too clunky. But I've seen many games so far in GM, mainly in the other regions, but I think also here in Asia Pacific for Tom60229, where Grommash is just getting the job done. Getting your opponent down to 12 health and to go Grom in a rage, or 15 with a Rampage thrown in there as well, is really not that hard as Warrior. If you're just equipping a weapon off of the Corsair cache and swinging face with it a few times, that's most of the work done already.
Yeah, I do think this is also partially in response to expecting Druid to fall in popularity a little bit, because if we talk about the 3 ways that Warrior can try and win a matchup, there's A, remove all of your stuff, gain a bunch of armor through the risky skipper combos. There's B, develop their tempo really, really early with things like the eggs or the Warmaul Challengers plus Rampage. Or there's C, there's the OTK, which we used to say only was Corcon Elite, with the Inner Rage and the Bloodsworn Mercenary. But now they're giving themselves more flexibility to go for that OTK, or in combination with the tempo game plan, have yet another finisher in Grom.
Yeah, it also just comes, I think, with a maturity in terms of play style with the deck. As players are learning it more and more, you're more likely to get these big Battle Rage turns off. Because for me personally, at least, when I first started playing the deck, turn 5 would roll around and I'd have no cards left. Every single game, I was just throwing stuff out and being left with nothing. Maybe it's because I'm too much of a Tom 60229 style player myself, who just plays the risky skipper on turn 1 with no regard for human life at all.
That was the craziest thing we've seen in APAC GM, and we've seen Conjurers calling into Wing Guardian for the only out to not win the game. Oh man, that was Flurry Alutamo too, wasn't it? And yet again, Alutamo blindsided Flurry a while ago. But yeah, I do like the analogy you bring up, that it's a sign of maturity, and the eggs are the training wheels. And once you've graduated from the egg school, now you're able to ride Grom, I guess, all the way to victory.
Moving staggeringly swiftly on from that remark there, Gia. I fully agree. And there's still room for improvement, I think, with this list. We're seeing players run eggs without the Terran Gorefiend, which initially seemed like a package that you would never want to break apart. But consistently, people are seeing eggs are good in the mulligan, Terran is bad, which means that people are coming to the conclusion that maybe you just want the eggs to damage them and summon them, the snakes, that way. It's a very weird deck and a very weird matchup, no matter what you're playing it against. But first of all, we have to go with a much more standard matchup, at least in terms of what we've seen so far this week, with the Druid yet again, Gia, here, up against the Highlander Hunter.
Yep, we talked ages about Warrior because we've just been itching to see some more games of it, but for now, it's going to be yet another Druid game. The Highlander Hunter, also a deck that I do enjoy watching, and Kin here's got a pretty decent curve.
What a very respectable curve indeed. Up against Druid in the early game, it really doesn't matter too much what you're playing, as long as you can just get stats on the board and start hitting them as fast as you can, and especially with Stormhammer ready to go. I think Kin can deviate from what I would expect to be the more standard game plan of getting down big minions that Druid can't deal with and just hit them in the face.
You know, Derek, I don't know how these Japanese players do it, but there's always this fungal fortune on 2, it seems like. And to be fair, Posesi is including Wild Growth in the first place, which curves really nicely into Glowfly's form, but it's just happening again!
It is. But this is still a slow start for Posesi. He hasn't found Crystal Power, Wrath, Moonfire. He doesn't have any of the removal cards in order to clear this off. And taking a turn here to Wild Growth obviously does lead up to the play of Glowfly Swarm on the following turn. But that's still not removing anything on that turn. He may just be taking too much damage here.
I can see your point, because we do see Kin's hand, which is burst, burst, and burst as soon as a dragon comes into hand.
Exactly.
But for Posesi, I think what he sees is that in most situations, it's just taking 6 on the following turn, maybe 8 on the next one, and that leaves him enough health to work with to still just go for the Glowfly plan, I think.
He is, however, clearly thinking of deviating here. If I had to wager a guess, I would say he's thinking either Savage Roar or Bog Beam here, both of which have their positives and negatives, to take out the Ooze, and then coin Glowfly into Wild Growth, into Exotic Mount Seller the turn after. And in the end, he does go for the Savage Roar. Obviously, more damage taken immediately, but it means that the Bog Beam is still active for a more powerful Mount Seller turn after. As you know what? I love this considered play from Posesi. He was so close to snap playing the Wild Growth, and what this does is just means he's so much less vulnerable to the burst damage.
Yeah, it is a very disciplined play from Posesi there. And it also means that because of the density of spells in hand, and just the fact that he had coin, he ends up playing Glowfly Swarm on the same turn anyway. And with the shake of the head at still no dragon appearing, I'll tell you what, he might not have a beast on board next turn, so I wonder if this kill command is going face right now. Is Kin in a position where he can even clear minions? Maybe his out is to say, you don't have Savage Roar.
He did just see a Savage Roar, but then it's in that weird situation where does seeing the first Savage Roar mean you think statistically he's less likely to have the second one because he's already played one? Or does it mean he would only play the first one because he has the second one in hand in order to clear?
I wonder.
If he doesn't clear anything off, he is dead.
So if he uses the hero power, say on a Glowfly, does he set up a 2-turn lethal? I don't think he does, because he can't reliably stick the minions he has on board.
In fact, he can't just clear one minion. With the power of the wild as well, he has to clear 2 minions,
Yes.
or he's just dead.
Oh my gosh.
Which he can do. Hero power plus a trade with the Zixor is not awful.
So he goes for playing around the 1-card combo, as you love to call it, Derek. But this does not beat the 2-card combo. For third in turn 5. Why are the Druids like this today, Derek?
Absolutely disgusting. I think that Posesi, you know, in the one real decision he had this game, which was whether you go for the Wild Growth or you end up going for the Savage Roar, I think he made absolutely the correct decision. It was just so rough for Kin there. He played around the 1 Savage Roar, but didn't bother playing around the 2-card combo. I think it was correct from both players there, but it just turns out that Posesi gets the better of it.
It's kind of bringing back to that game between Alitamo and Flurry, where I strongly believe that what Flurry ended up going for was just correct in most situations, which is they probably don't have this combo of cards so early on in the game, and that's the only way they have lethal on that exact turn. And if they don't have that, the play that Kin and Flurry did end up going for puts them in so much of a better position. But you just get Druided sometimes.
You do indeed. And Gia, as we are now an hour into the broadcast, I just like to say I cannot imagine casting European GM. Imagine taking more than 5 minutes to get through a game here. Not to laugh too much at our compatriots over there, but they've got Yarla, they've got Bunny Hopper. It's been a little bit of a rope fest over here, whereas here in good old Asia Pacific, we have our players lethal on turn 6, disgusting plays no matter what is happening, and we are zipping right through, which means, of course, we are going to give our players a little moment to recuperate. We're going to jump to a quick break before we come back with the conclusion of Posesi versus Kin. Blink and you will have missed it, but we are already on to our second series of the day, and we're already done with the first game, in fact, where Posesi was able to take a lightning-fast Druid victory over Kin's Hunter there. A matchup that I wasn't necessarily expecting to go that way, especially given the quality of Kin's starting hand. Super aggressive, but one crucial difference there for Posesi by killing off the Ooze. Whether or not it would have actually made the difference, I think gave him the highest chance possible of taking that quite silly game Gia. But that does now mean that Posesi is left with no rogue here, given his slightly different lineup. So I think he's just in a pretty great spot.
Yeah, even if you covered up two of Kin's classes and said that they got a win already, let's say the Druid and the Hunter were out of contention, I would still put Posesi as the favorite, because the Zoo and the Warrior lining up against the Rogue feels like Posesi can easily get the win. And just thinking back on it, yet more parallels between Kin's game versus Druid and Alatemu's game of Druid versus Flurry. It had to be those exact three cards, right? Savage Roar and Times Wild. In Posesi's case, it was broken down over 2 turns for him to get the win, and in Alatemu's case, it was all in 1 turn. It's just insane how often that's been happening today.
Yeah, it really is. The Japanese players have been eating their Weetabix for sure, or whatever the Japanese equivalent is. I'm sure it's much more adorable at the very least. But it is going to be the Zoo here up first for Posesi, saving the best for last on the Warrior. And I honestly don't think, despite to the protestations of the Americas casters, I have been pretty happy with Zoo overall. I think it's just pretty well positioned in the current metagame.
I can definitely see that up against Rogues and Druids. If you expect those to be the 3rd and 4th decks, then it's just a pretty decent 4th deck in its own right. But we can also talk about the build of Zoo. It's a bit different for Posesi, a bit more of the greedier build, I would say, including Sinister Deals, Dark Pharaoticon, and Zephrys. But of course, you still have that meaty combo of the Scrap Imp and the Hand of Gul'dan plus synergy cards.
That is the big one. The fact that the Scrap Imp is already down and the Hand of Gul'dan. Posesi is just laughing here. He knows he got the nuts 2 games in a row now.
Not only that, this Expired Merchant lines up super well against Kin's board. Okay, he now can go Zephrys for Power of the Wild? Later on, I guess.
Yeah, well, obviously Zephrys is the pick. It's just how you're using it. It could be used for, I don't know, given how buff the Zoo minions are going to be, maybe you can get a Shadow Word Ruin to pop off? That seems optimistic.
Yeah. I think they're just short of being buff enough for that.
Yeah.
You shall not pass.
The majority of them, anyway.
Why do you call?
Even against Zephrys, this lines up so well.
There just won't be any time for Kin to go Zephrys into Brawl unless Zephrys can recognize next turn that if Kin goes Hero Power then Zephrys, will it give you Brawl for a turn 5 play?
You know what? I don't know.
Probably.
So as it stands, there's just no way Kin's coming back on board unless Zephrys delivers with an AoE.
Could he try and set up for a Shadow Madness? Even then, if he steals the Imp, the Divine Shield still goes back on the other side. 3-2.
Right now, would it give Pain, Execute, something like that? Okay, Betrayal, I feel, is not getting very much done.
Yeah, this selection looks pretty awful, right?
Indeed. I think he can clear off 1 minion at most this turn.
He was definitely looking for Shadow Word Pain here, right?
I would agree.
Even the Betrayal positioning is pretty good for Kin as well, with the high health minions on either side of the 4-3.
If you want to get very nitpicky about it, then the 4-3 should have been to the far end of the board.
Right, sure.
I think. And just not beside a 3 attack minion.
Actually, even then, though, then you can target the Scrap Imp, right, and it would kill off the 4-3 and damage the...
It would be like... It would be like Og Merchant on far left, and then the one next to it is the 2 attack minion.
Right,
like
okay, yeah.
But that's super nitpicky. If your opponent's going Zephyr's Betrayal that turn, I think you've already won.
Well, the main thing about the lackeys here is, Witchy Lackey is not amazing when your cards are all buffed. But the important thing is that any lackey that Posesi gets down on this turn will turn into a 4/4 on the following turn when Dark Pharaoh Takan hits the board.
What can even do? Even if this kills the best target, the 4/4, Takan just creates another 4/4. And Posesi doesn't even have to deal with this Rot Nest Drake. All of it can go face.
It does trade though. It's a lot of damage to sink.
It is
Uranus
curious.
isn't really a consideration there because it would just trade the same anyway.
Yeah, I wonder. And he's already seen his Zephyrus.
Yeah, I preferred the full face push there for sure.
Evasive Worm looks like it can get at least a 2-for-1, or Posesi's got to rush something into it. And in many cases, that might give Kin the liberty to maybe try and swing the board, but it's just far too many 4/4s.
Taunt Lackey is fantastic as well, make things awkward for the buy 3.
I want the Hellfire because it goes
Hellfire's
face for the most damage.
Right, exactly. Drain Life is a very weak card overall. Significantly more powerful lifesteal cards have been printed, but it could be used if you're in a pure face race for sure.
Yeah. This just didn't even seem close. And we can see after Posesi rushes something into this and trades, Kin will then have to respond with something like Siamat Rush or Infury, but even that doesn't have enough damage.
Yep, still just dead to the 8 damage that will be remaining on board. Dino Tamer Brand off the top, as impressive as it is, does not get the job done. And that is another disgusting victory going to Posesi there. He just got the dream hand yet again.
Indeed. And it's not very often that I would say that Dark Pharaoh Takan on curve is nuts. There's so many positions where it's completely unplayable because either you're not that far ahead on board, or you don't have lackeys, or it's just like, it's a very slow card, which is why we haven't seen it been included in many zoo lists. But Posesi had his cake and ate it.
Yeah, well, that's just part of it, right? That's why it's even more the dream hand. It wasn't only like the best possible start, it then followed up into a hand that can't even lose to Zephyrus. You could definitely argue that Kin misplayed the Zephyrus because it is one of those cards that is extremely difficult to know what it's going to give you in every single situation. But you can try and learn to the best of your ability. And if I had to guess, I would say that it didn't really give him what he was looking for there because it wiped off very, very little damage from the board. Maybe he could have tried to save it for a freeze and go for lethal that way, but to be perfectly honest, I'm reaching here and I don't think there was much at all that Zephyrus could offer to win him the game.
Agreed. I just wonder if it could ever give Brawl for the following turn, because every time I've seen Zephyrus give AoE, it's to be played on that turn, meaning you have the mana to spend on it. But we shall never know the whims of the old Zeph. But now we're going to see Warrior in play, the one that we have been hyping up a lot, and already I'm seeing Injured 12-year Bloodsworn Mercenary.
I'm not actually sure that I'm convinced, to be perfectly honest. It's a play that's powerful, but is very weak to just a wrath from your opponent. If that comes down, all of a sudden, your entire early game plan is pretty much written off. So I was very tempted there to just go for some of the more powerful cards, like, of course, Corsair Cash, or a Warm Wall Challenger at the start of the game.
I definitely see your point, especially because this is Druid, as you said. They have a removal that lines up the Injured 12-year. Versus something like Rogue, I would insta-keep that.
Sure, yeah.
But
that
maybe
seems much more likely to stick.
But maybe Posesi's thinking this can just get there at some point.
Well, I don't think it's going to get there now because Bog Beam is there, ready to answer. With the pickup of Overgrowth, it does get a little bit more difficult because Kin could have gone, of course, save it, Overgrowth, Mount Seller on turn 7. But it seems like he's gearing up for something a little bit more powerful later on first.
I love the respect from Kin, despite not bringing Warrior. And if you're going to leave it up, it means you have to recognize what the deck's game plan is and be prepared to deal with that Rampage is a huge threat there. Even just a Bloodsworn for one copy.
Oh man, Posesi is just an inner rage away from running away with this game. But until you can find that, this Warmall Challenger is just too calm, too cool and relaxed, because it needs to get angry before the Bloodsworn can start buffing it up.
Indeed. Just say the word one card combo, one card combo, and it'll be finished.
Well, I'll clearly have to because you can't say it yet.
I really can't. It just makes my brain fried to even imagine.
What? It's a one card combo. It's all you need to get the game done.
So Posesi could go for the
there.
Corsair Cash here, draw either Ankar or Livewire lands, but instead he goes for the full board develop.
When you said Corsair Cashier, I thought you said the Corsair Cashier. Like you go to the checkout and there's a pirate like, oh, that'll be $3.75, matey.
That was great, Dara. Genuinely. I'm not even being sarcastic.
Thanks, Gia.
What a draw
well,
here.
the Glowfly Swarm is a great pickup now. He has the option of 5 2/2s, not 5 5/5s as they often say, buffing them up into 3/3s, and it's fighting back very strongly against the board. And with no risky skipper in sight, this is looking like it could be a very awkward board for Posesi to trade into.
I really like the timing of this. Even though he's not getting the full payoff and only 5 Glowflies, I think Kin recognizes that the risky skipper clears usually aren't available till around 6-7 mana, because at this point, if you're asking 3 procs of the risky skipper, you are asked for exactly both the other Sky Raiders or the other risky and a 2-drop. It's a very specific combination to have in hand this early on.
This does, of course, now allow Posesi to attack his Warmall Challenger into something. So we could see Warmall Challenger plus the Bomb Wrangler into one of them, Rampage it, and then Bloodsworn all on the Warmall Challenger, which sets up a very powerful board. But man, does that give a lot of initiative and a lot of options to Kin.
It really does. But on the bright side, those trades give him a little bit more armor, a little bit more sustain against those scammy Savage Roar wins.
Wow. Going halfway here. Getting the buff, saying it's probably unlikely to die. And, well, to be fair, even though it can die on board, even if that does happen, you've then sunk your entire board into it, which I think Posesi would be fine with.
He just clears as many minions right now as possible. Major respect for the Druid from a very loyal himself.
Is this a Mountseller turn Gia?
Yeah. He's a mana short of being able to pop off, but you know what? Purely because he's got the second one, I wouldn't mind seeing one used just for 1 minion right now.
Even then, it's a gamble to see if you get anything actually playable off of the Fungal Fortunes thereafter.
I can
but
see
it is
another
just a
line.
5/8.
Yeah.
Do you want to float that much mana by not just playing one here?
Well, he could go for another line, right? With the Rising Winds for 2 minions and Soul of the Forest.
True.
Or now that he's taken the draw, 1 minion Soul of the Forest still seems like a pretty good push onto the board.
Time waits for no one.
Now he's got quite a few more spells to pair with a Mountseller for next turn. He still consists drawing with the Rising Winds. Or hero power to clear even more. Wow! The full respect!
I am left actually thoroughly unconvinced by this line, Gia. The fact that Posesi just equipped and swung with an Anchor means that he's fairly likely to have a risky skipper, against which a bunch of 2/2s do very little. Whereas if it's in Mountseller plus Ironbark on that turn, you trade everything into the Warmall Challenger, you're left with one of your Glowflies being left alive because it was buffed by the Ironbark, and you have a Mountseller on board. That is difficult for Warrior to deal with at the best of times. And then even if they do deal with that, you have the second Mountseller to follow up thereafter. I just think you want to play to the weakness of Warrior, which is the fact that they don't have very strong single target removal, whereas this type of board is super easy for Warrior to deal with.
I will say though that in Kin's favor, at least he did end up clearing the Warmal one way or another, because he knows that if Risky
Yes,
Skipper
yeah.
comes down, everything small on the board is getting removed, and only the big boys or big girls are getting left on the board. So he's made it so that if Posesi's going to go for a skip return, the board essentially resets. It's just going to be a few low attack minions left for Posesi. And in which case, maybe he's thinking that's the point he would rather play Mount Seller. I think well recognized from Posesi that the board doesn't even merit a skipper yet. It's not that threatening.
Yeah, this is really smart from Posesi. This, I think, is playing exactly into one of the key things that you realize about these Druid matchups, which is that when there's 2 health minions on the board, Risky Skipper can activate once to damage everything, then you play the Blood Boil Brute, it damages them again, and you have a 6/7 on the board. And of course, there's now not much board space, weirdly enough, for Kin to go with the Mount Seller.
Well, maybe if the bomb provides. I like the start of the ordering, get all of the guaranteed attacks in, and there you go.
Supply only the finest creatures.
Expect we see this for draw.
It's actually pretty big to get a taunt
Ooh.
there
And he
in order
taunts
to
up his
protect against the
Porcupine.
Blood Boil.
Yeah. Very good outcome.
This play I really like from Kin. Traditionally, you taunt up the Mount Seller because the 11 health is so difficult to deal with. But in this instance, it's going to be really, really tough for Posesi to both get through the taunts and damage the Mount Seller enough for the Blood Boil to kill it.
Agreed. But he will be able to get his free Blood Boil now. Let's see what else can be provided. The
Copy
sticky
it as
finger.
well.
Yeah. Woo. And that's enough to clear both of these. Sorry, enough to clear the Porcupine and the Mount Seller.
Yeah, as long as the missiles didn't go horribly wrong there, everything works out fine. Does of course mean that the Blood Boil Brute will die, but the important thing is, Posesi's now cleared the board.
That might
Easier
be,
said than done.
yeah, might be a relief for him right now, but once he sees the second Mount Seller, it's gonna be a rough go at it for him to come back on board without a Battle Rage for refill.
That really has just been what he's missing this entire time.
He's thinking, does he ever rush this Mercenary, commit an Inner Rage to clean off the Mount Seller and preserve his 6/5? I don't hate that.
It is a weird dance you're playing with both of these decks where neither of them have especially strong single target removal. So the first player to stick that one big minion is often in a really good spot, as both players have been consistently trying to do.
The second push from Kin's Mount Seller might be too much for Posesi now. The Wild Growth double spell interact. That's another Mukla.
And another Dreadbreaker.
Oh my gosh, Diving Griffin has been dethroned as the King of Beasts, just like a glory managed to dethrone Surrender.
As the King of Beasts? I don't really understand the comparison. Jim.
As the King of APAC. Okay, it's going to start off by seeing what lackey he gets. It's got to be Ethereal into... You know, I wouldn't hate the Commanding Shout here. Or Bash. That, of course, works. For only 2 draws, though, I think.
I mean, the Corsair Cache does literally nothing. Inner Rage you can look at to try and get a surprise lethal with Corkron sometime soon, but it's just not there, is it?
Not enough. Oh, and he even draws a Livewire.
Grom's the one I'm looking at here. This does open up potential outs here for Posesi to go for some super aggressive lines. He obviously has to trade some stuff here. You're never getting away if you're just literally dead on board. So the Mount Seller looks like it's dying at the very least.
Correct. And he could play the Corkron to face if he's saying he needs Grom Inner Rage.
Eight damage plus the 6. Not quite lethal represented yet.
But Ysera Crystal Power for healing. I don't think Kin has to be worried about any lethal outs from the other side, and he can just set up for his own lethal on the next.
I don't think he does either, GM. The Livewire Lance can, of course, always provide you with some miracle outs, mainly off of another Ethereal Lackey if he's able to find that. But it's looking slimmer and slimmer.
My dream is
And because the 2 minions left on board are 1 health, they can't be damaged without dying. I don't even think there's a reason to trade to play around something like Battle Rage, for example. Kin is counting up all of the max damage possibilities for Posesi, but even something like Rom and Inner Rage is just 12, 14 with the Lackey, 17 with the weapon, and 19 with Kobold Lackey. So technically, I don't think 21 is unsafe, but I also don't see a reason not to take the heal here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, given that an Inner Rage has already been used. Oh no, wait, sorry, if it was double Inner Rage, then maybe that was lethal at 21 in the most fringe possible scenario, so
But one
why
was
not?
used.
Yes, one was used already.
Oh, Brawl. Gotta be that, right?
Unless you want to take Sweeping Strikes, which can be used with Grom to clear off a lot of minions.
On the following turn?
Yeah, I mean, if you're using Grom for clear here, it's probably game over anyway, so I agree that you're leaning towards Brawl. Maybe you don't use it this turn, of course, if you have another way to stay alive.
I do think that the whole reason for picking Brawl is so that you can use it this turn, because obviously the Sweeping Strike is setting up for a clear on the following turn. And Posesi's going for a game plan that, as far as he can see, oh wow, he even wins the Brawl.
Okay.
As far as he can see, it's kind of the reverse of how this matchup usually goes. It's like, if the Druid can exhaust the Warrior of resources, and happens because Druid runs more card draw cards,
Yeah.
then they win. But now Posesi's saying, try to come up with more board refill. And of course, Kin with the Ysera active won't be too difficult for him.
Yeah, Overgrowth looking premium here just to draw 1 extra card. After the Glow Flare, I suppose.
Yeah,
Either
or
way, you're
maybe not
developing a
even
big
on this
board.
turn. Yeah,
Yeah.
like this.
As long as some kind of development does come down here to represent lethal, you're probably absolutely fine here. As Kin, Posesi does finally find that Battle Rage, and he can draw 2 cards, but I think it's a little bit too expensive along the process.
Not much that helps him off the top of his deck. I think he was searching for another Ethereal Lackey into Brawl
Yep.
there. But now that he knows it's not available, it's gonna have to be Grom trade. Disgusting. And not the way we've usually been using this word today.
If he hits Battle Rage into Risky Skipper, there's still nothing. Yep.
Not enough.
He's just dead.
He can stay alive from his perspective by clearing off the 6/6 and armoring up. Kin is only showing 9 on board plus 1 from hero power.
Okay, fair enough. I wasn't even seeing a way he could stay alive on the board.
Supposed to do that, even though it's very slim outs. Kin puts a point on the board, and in fairness to him, it's against the Warrior, which we kept saying, why would he leave this up?
Well, I think this is actually a matchup that we've seen go the Druid's way twice now. Obviously, once from Kin and once from Blitzchung. I would imagine a very strong practice partners, given they're the only 2 players to have gone with this strategy. If you remember back to Blitzchung's victory, it was due to Frosty getting triple Risky Skipper in the Mulligan.
Oh, right.
One of them made by the Sky Raider, which was a very, very weird game indeed. This one was a little bit more standard from Posesi in terms of the gameplay. He was able to get down a War Maul and almost copy it later on. But the real missing component there was just a timely Battle Rage. You're usually able to put up 1 wall of big threats as the Warrior without it, but thereafter you're just using too many cards if you're not refilling.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as being maybe the one chink in Warrior's armor. But now, It's on Kin to see if he can complete a reverse sweep, and between the two decks remaining, I definitely feel like the Hunter has more potential to help him out here.
Yep, and you are looking to pick up as many games as you can within each series. It's not like usual best of 5, where it doesn't matter. Here, the tiebreakers come into effect, which is game score after match score. So I would not be surprised, as I think we are seeing here, to see the Hunter. And again, what looks like, even before the mulligan, a pretty decent starting hand for Kin.
Definitely the coin and double 2-drops and Bran as well. And I think he's definitely going to manipulate the Zephyrus to give him well.
Someone's gotta lead the charge.
I would imagine, but on the other side, Posesi's hand as well. He's premium.
But funnily enough, the fact that he has a 1-drop on 1 is actually beneficial for Kin's Bone Chewer Brawler, but he actually is going to choose to hold back. Maybe wants to play the Bran even sooner by the coin.
Another Warmal Challenger Bloodsworn opening here for Posesi, if he can find a Battle Rage or potentially trade it into the Bone Chewer Brawler. But weirdly enough, Warmal Challenger lines up really badly against this, so you definitely want to hold back at the moment.
I was a little bit surprised to not see Zephyrus for Wild Growth there, given that he knows that a weapon has been drawn by Corsair Cash. The 2 health versus 3 health difference is not very big, so that leads me to assume that Kin's actually saving Zephyrus for a specific purpose here, like an ooze.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the 2 main approaches there. It was either you can say, alright, I'll ignore the weapon and just let it get its swings off and ramp up towards Dinotamer Bran, or I can remove it here. This slide has the benefit, obviously, of removing lackeys. He's ahead on board, and he can curve very nicely into Bone Rage, but I don't know, Gira. An early Dinotamer Bran sounds pretty good to me.
It sounds good, I guess, because we're in this. My warrior should be, the hunter rather, should be the aggressor. But maybe we are approaching this matchup differently from how Kin sees it. It seems to me that all of his plays so far have been in response to what Posesi has.
Yeah, much less proactive. Which, you know, if he'd been playing against the hand that Posesi got last game, that might have worked better because he would have run out of cards due to the lack of card draw. But now already with Risky Skipper, plus the Battle Rage, and a Warmal, a Bloodsworn, even an Armor Smith, if Kin starts getting in too much damage, Posesi's got everything he could need.
There's a possibility to even go for the Battle Rage as early as now. He could go for Warmal, just kill off this ooze, and then 2 mana draw 3.
Doesn't need to worry about hand space, I guess, if he's drawing another card here first, which factors into thinking.
Sure. Possibly Ankar.
I challenge you to Makara!
Both the skippers in hand now. And one of them is going to be used for relatively low value.
Yeah, this is very aggressive use.
Particularly against Hunter, though, that has used Zephyrus already. I don't actually know of a way that the Hunter can remove several minions from this board.
Right, the best is Unleash the Hounds, I guess, or Desert Spear would be okay, but even those only remove 2 maximum off the board here, which still allows the Blood Maul to copy the Blood Sworn to copy the Warmal.
And I think if Kin is spending 3 of his mana just to remove your 1/2 and your 1/1 on turn 5, it's very happy for Posesi.
Great point.
Kin is looking for something better to do and looking at the Fey Wing, but also, the Felmo presents a very interesting option. Just because of the fact that it's development that you can invest right now, and it doesn't really interact with Skipper until the turn you plan for it to.
Guardian Orc Merchant does have synergy with Varanus, very possibly on turn 7, however, just being able to clear off a key minion, which is something that I think Kin is lacking at the moment.
That does conflict with the other turn 7 he really wants to do, which is the Bran.
A very valid response.
Posesi, if he wants to keep being aggressive, could use the other Skipper to go for a Battle Rage this turn. Or even just something like Bloodsworn Battle Rage. It's still 2 mana draw 3.
It looks like he's gearing up for it. The draw 5 here, I'd have to imagine, with Armor Smith into Battle Rage. It's powerful, but it does mean he is left significantly less reactive now that both of the Risky Skippers have been used.
Worth noting that he's seen the one of Unleash the Hound, so this type of what looks to be a fragile board is actually very annoying for Kin to deal with.
The weakness to this play is, of course, Varanus, which could come down and neutralize all the health on Posesi's side of the board. And I was going to say it's not too bad. It actually kind of is. Posesi's hand doesn't do nearly as much as he was looking to do on the following turn now.
It is very cool that Varanus, by setting all of their health to 1, makes them back to full health and not damaged.
Right.
So this also has that added benefit of making, say, Blood Boil Brutes cost full mana expenditure for Posesi again. And if anything gets played, all of Posesi's board goes boom. So he's got to trade off his skipper first.
Well, he could still use the effect of the skipper, for example, by trading the other 3 minions into Varanus and then just playing the Bomb Wrangler, which would get him a little bit of development.
I feel that's a bit of a waste of 1/1s, which I think we went over is kind of awkward for Hunter right now. And the Armor Smith has so much potential, I think, to keep gaining. You could trade this off with something like the Korkan Elite.
I must choose.
Like, or you could just go Pulvier, Rampage, Bloodsworn, ignore the Varanus for now.
Made to fit.
I think what he's going for here is trying to keep intact the combo that can come down on turn 9 of Korkron, Inner Rage, Rampage, Bloodsworn it by just going as wide as possible, pushing as much damage to face, only sacrificing the risky skipper because of what you said about it destroying the whole board. And I think this is actually very smart. The most powerful plays that can come down on turn 7 are obviously the Dino Tamer Bran and the Siamat, neither of which really interfere that heavily with this game plan.
I definitely agree. Posesi's gearing up for that turn 9 18 damage combo. And in the meantime, making things very awkward for Kin. He's maintaining a high health total by playing these Armor Smiths. And also board advantage because Hunter struggles to deal with these wide boards. So it's kind of just stalling Kin until Posesi can take that win.
Much deliberation ends up in what do you know, Dino Tamer Bran probably just the best option here.
Probably, but it looks like it might end up being another King trade. Just because the Armor Smiths negate any of the damage you deal face by healing back up. Oh my gosh.
Ooh.
That goes up to 22 burst potential now.
He can't just do that this turn, can he? Actually, sorry. If he goes Korkron double Inner Rage and foregoes the Rampage.
Oh, that's cheap. Is that
16 damage?
Okay, close
Not
to
quite
GG.
there. Yeah. Very, very close indeed. And he's looking it over. I don't think there's any way he can get there, even with Bomb Wrangler or any of that nonsense. So the name of the game is just survive for this turn, which I think shouldn't be too hard. He's seen Zephyrus, so there's no kind of Inner Rage or Wind Fury lethal that can be found here.
Oh. Bit of a deviation here by expending this Bloodsworn. I wouldn't have minded seeing one Inner Rage because we could see that the 18 might get there anyway, but Posesi is pivoting a little bit. Of course, it is scary to face down 17 damage on the other side.
Very interesting. Because the problem now for Posesi is just board space, though, for all these bombs that he wants to try and summon with 2 buffed up Bomb Wranglers. Obviously, he's miles ahead on board, but I think if he saved the second Bloodsworn, he could have got himself in a situation where he was more likely to hit lethal on the following turn.
Yeah, it's weird. And I don't think Posesi was super happy with that turn either. It's just very awkward that if he wanted to save all of those cards, what was he spending the rest of his mana on? Like, just Sky Captain Crag?
Yeah. Still that little bit ways off lethal, sorry. I think 26 damage is available overall on this turn, or 25 in fact.
Although Posesi did recognize that rampaging and copying these Bomb Wranglers is still very difficult for Kin to deal with, even though it looks greedy.
Yeah.
Or sorry, even though it looks like an overreaction given that he had lethal in the next ring. It still just gets there. Kin can present his own counter lethal.
He can make some very powerful trades though. Orc Merchant to give one of his minions Divine Shield, trade. Kill Command, another great trade there. And the bombs are unlikely to deal much damage to face.
True. Ooh, Rot Nest.
Gotta go very quick though.
So we're looking at 6 from hand, 9, 10, 11 available.
Can he draw a weapon for guaranteed lethal?
That's what I was about to ask you. I feel like we haven't seen all 3 weapons this game.
No, we definitely haven't.
What now?
So, is that not just game? Because it's 5 mana to play Cash and Weapon. Korkron Enrage fills out the 9. And then 5 can go face.
Looks good to me.
Is Posesi tunneling on something else here? Time is running out. Okay.
There we go.
He sees it. He sees it. It's a bit scary there. But wow.
He's sending it all to face. Korkron in a rage. There we go. Giving me heart palpitations at the very end there is Posesi. And even though I think there was a line he could have taken there at the end that gave him a much higher chance of locking out the game, he's able to take it in the end. And he knows that was good enough to get the job done. And he does go up now 2-0 in the first week of round robin here in Grandmasters. And even if we put his play aside, based purely on his lineup, I think Posesi is very deserving to be up for the scores.
I 100% agree with your point about the lineup. I think it was very heads up from the archetypes chosen to the text within those archetypes. But I am hesitant to say that the line he ended up going for was strict and holding all of the enrages. At first glance, it definitely seemed weird. It seemed to not be consistent with what he was going for. But I do think what he ended up having on board with the 2/7/5s that generate a lot of bombs and miles away from lethal for Kin, I feel like that is also very powerful. And maybe he was thinking that the Korkron OTK gets stopped by 1 or 2 taunts.
I do see your point. I think he could have maybe found a middle ground where he didn't use the Bloodsworn and could still have buffed up a big minion, because again, the problem he was running into there to an extent was board space. I don't know, I guess we could go back and forth there, because, you know, the Bone Wraith had already been used, as had the Bone Chewer Brawler, so there were very few actual taunts that could have been thrown down at that point in order to get in the way, especially given that Zephyrus had come down. We could go back and forth all day, as I said, but the important thing is that Posesi did come away with the win there.
True enough. And to be fair, looking at Posesi's reaction, I also don't think he was terribly happy with how the play ended up going. It's just my point that I want to make, that maybe the macro game plan of OTK wasn't strictly superior to what he ended up going for in terms of macro.
Yes, very, very possibly. But let's take a look at the schedule of what we have for the rest of the day. We are all done with our Division A matches for today. So Posesi, as we said, he moves up to 2-0. I believe Kin moves down to 0-2, however, unless I am mistaken, which is a bit of a rough start for him. But hopefully turn things around. Staz and Dawn, however, is going to be our next matchup, Gia, and that is over to Division B, which means things are getting a little bit scarier for these guys.
Indeed. We did see Staz take a win yesterday with a very powerful Face Hunter gameplay, I would say. And Dawn is another player with